What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with my co-founder, Corey Behnke at Cheesehead TV, and a very special guest here on Cheesehead TV, General Manager of the Green Bay Packers, Brian Gutekunst. Brian, how you doing, man?
Doing good. We're in the middle of camp, which means football's right around the corner, and it's an exciting time. I mean, this is kind of where it's just a lot of fun seeing everybody out there at practice and getting our guys going. So excited for the season. Excited to get to Pittsburgh to see how these guys react under the lights for the first time.
That's the big key right now, right? As far as, okay, you get that first flush of camp where you're on the grass, they're finally in pads after 5 days or so, and they're hitting each other, and it's time to hit someone else, but it's also time for kind of live action. How hard is it to parse that as far as what you're seeing in an environment that is certainly more football-like once they get the pads on, but it's still not live?
Yeah, I think, for me a lot, over the years, I think, this beginning of camp while you're out of practice, not that there's not an evaluation and you want to see good performances, but there's a lot of learning going on, and there's a lot of, mixing and matching. The cohesion probably isn't there, right now, because you're learning and they're installing and things. By the time we get to those preseason games, particularly what we do in those preseason games, they should know, and they should be close to their comfort zone as far as being able to, to perform. I do think, as they go, you want to see a trend of getting better each and every week, because certainly it's like anything, you may know it, but when you get under those lights for the first time and you get out in a real preseason game, sometimes it takes a minute. So I think that's what we're looking for is for all the learning through the spring and through the beginning of camp to come together in those preseason games and see guys really perform.
You talk about getting out under the lights. Were you concerned at all about how sloppy family night was? I mean, there were a lot of penalties, a lot of drop passes, things that looked like, I know it was definitely a humid night, longer practice, but it was sloppier than I recall any family night being.
Yeah, I mean, you have some of those practices through training camp, I think, but yeah, it's always concerning. It was nice to have the NFL officials there. I think that's why you saw a lot more flags than you probably normally would, because we had real NFL officials there, and they're working on their game too. But at the same time, I think it was good for us. I also think we had a few long drives in there where, our guys, getting their wind and their conditioning down for longer drives maybe than we've had so far was really good for us, and certainly, it was good for Matt to kind of see where we're at with some of that stuff. So, but yeah, I think you're always concerned when it's not clean. I do think sometimes when the offense struggles, it looks less clean than because the defense was doing some pretty good stuff.
They are doing some great stuff all of camp long. Yeah. I mean, it's
isn't that a lot like Jonathan Gannon energy though?
Yeah, there's some of that, right?
Yeah, I think usually the defense is a little bit ahead of the offense by this time of year, and that's usually how it goes. But no, I think again, there's always ups and downs in camps. There's good days and bad days, but I do think I really like our team and I like where they're headed. But I'm excited for Pittsburgh to kind of see how these guys do.
I want to pull back a little bit to kind of your process throughout the offseason when you come off of a really disappointing end of the season. I don't need to belabor that, but I think we've talked a lot about it on the channel as far as what the obvious kind of areas of concern were, the areas you needed to get better. And I think number one is the offensive line. I think it was it was surprising to see how the offensive line really struggled through a lot of last season. It was very inconsistent. You've really not taken a big swing, I would say. I love the selection of Jager Burton, my Aaron Nagler draft crush, trademark. And I think he started well at camp. But how do you – I guess the question would be, I know sometimes around the league in particular there are general managers who will – like rip up the floorboards and start kind of maybe not start all over, but do a big influx of maybe outside talent or something like that. You've clearly chosen to trust the kind of development of some of these younger guys. We see Jacob Monk now getting, first team snaps. That's a guy who, he's been around for a while and hasn't really played a whole lot of football for you. What is it about like doubling down on investing in the guys you have and developing them rather than, I would think, the easy button would be let's go sign up a couple free agents.
Yeah, I think, and certainly, really good offensive linemen don't hit the market very often to begin with, right? That just doesn't happen. Particularly big guys, just if they can play, usually they don't get let out of the places that they're at. But what I would say is, I really like our group. I really like the guys. I think it's like anything. The offensive line, the cohesion of the group is more important than the individual parts, right? Now, certainly the guys got to be able to play. But I do like our guys, and I like the way they're working. We do have a ways to go, and I think we got to get better. And it was a little disappointing last year as we went towards the second half of the season. But I really do believe in their talent, but they got to come together and play well. In Jacob's case, he was nicked up a little bit early. I think that held him back a little bit, and you see that sometimes. Offensive line in this league is much different than college. There's so much spread, and it's just get the ball out, and it's a very different game. So it does take those guys a little time to develop to the speed and the power of being that National Football League. But yeah, I think I'm intrigued by our group. I'm liking the fact that some of these guys are staying in one place a little bit more than maybe they had in the past.
That is noticeable, right? Especially comparative to what looked like. I mean, every week guys were in different spots last year. There's been a little bit more cohesion.
Yeah, and I think the versatility is important, but at the same time, it's hard to get really good at anything unless you have constant reps in one spot. Not only individually, but then as a group. Being able to rely on each other and kind of understand what each guy's going to do, how they're going to do it.
Do you want to ask your question now? Because I know you've been waiting all off season. So let's get it out of the way.
You drafted a kicker.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
So far, so good. And we're hoping that it's got Mason Crosby type results. So we'll see. But now Trey's doing a great job. I mean, we obviously thought he was the most talented kicker. I think most of the time in the draft, those guys go with the bottom of the fourth, beginning of the fifth.
Do you think that's overvalued place to pick a kicker, 4 or 5, the 4th or 5th round?
Yeah, it really depends how it turns out. But I do think if you're going to take a kicker, particularly that high, I think you better have some patience, right? Because that's a premium pick, and if you're going to pull the plug quickly because he's not doing well, because a lot of these guys will go through some struggles. It's just that's the nature of this thing in the NFL. But we had Trey as the highest rated guy. We really liked him. Didn't really go in. We didn't have a ton of picks this year like we usually have, so I didn't foresee really picking a kicker. But as we went and where we were at that time and the way the board was, he was kind of sticking out to us and was like, okay, well, let's take a shot here, and because we believed in the player and the guy, and certainly our new special teams coordinator felt really good about that too. I'm not going to just kind of do that without him being on board with that. So. We were excited to get him, and again, I think a lot of it had to do with one, that he fell a little bit further than we expected, and then two, the way our board was, we kind of had 2 guys. At the time, we had 2 picks in the 7th round left, and we had 2 guys that we really felt good about taking, and we were many picks away. I didn't really feel either guy would be there by the time we got there, and we were, our guys, our scouts, and everybody in the building did such a good job with our UDFA pickups that. I kind of felt a lot of the guys we might end up drafting with those 2 7th-round picks we could possibly get in the UDFA market as well. So that's kind of why we did it, and so far good. He's done a really nice job. They've been kicking more in Lambeau than they have in the past, which I think is a wise move, and he's done a good job. So, but.
I mean, I feel like it's Green Bay, so there's always like if you read the blogs, which I know you don't, Brian. If you read everything,
read the blogs. What is this? 2003.
There's a kicker controversy every 2 seconds.
See, this is what I'm like. This is my thing. I can't handle another summer. Although I did appreciate Matt's approach in family night. I think this is the first time he's ever done that, where there wasn't a kicking session. Right. He went out, made one kick, went back, there was scrimmage or drill work, and then came out to do another kick. That's more like a game.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I thought...
And he was 6 for 7, right?
Yes, he was 6 for 7.
So
nice.
I appreciated that approach.
Yeah, and I will say this, there's so much that I love about family night. It's one of my family's favorite events, and like when you walk out there and you see all the kids, to me that's just it's one of the coolest things.
100%.
There's a lot I don't like about family night. We've had some injuries in that session, and then if you guys remember back when Mason was our kicker, he went through a couple of family nights where it was tough. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You talk about killing a guy's confidence. So, but I do think that it's a nice way for Trey, obviously, to kind of get that feel for the very first time in Lambeau Field, because it's not easy to kick in Lambeau Field. I mean, obviously the weather was pretty good, but it's different. Outdoor kicking is different than indoor kicking in the National Football League. So I think that's a good kind of first step, and we'll see how Pittsburgh goes.
not to belabor specialists, but it is fascinating. You're here, so it's like you
got to take it. You got to take your shot, Corey.
Well, it's just like it's got to be this. I was thinking about this a long time since our interview because I was like, this has got to be kind of like annoying. This would be annoying for me. It's like you're managing a team and you've got two sides of the team, and then you basically have three positions that are just kind of outliers.
Yep.
And so, and a lot of times, like with Mason, you got a guy who you never have to think about for a long time, right?
Well, I mean, you say that, but there was 2 or 3 times during his career where he was really struggling. And I think I've said it before, and because people have asked me in press conferences, I marvel at Ted's patience. Right,
patience.
I mean, because I was in the building sometimes, like, what
are we doing?
Yeah, we got to go. We got to, and so I marvel at his patience to weather through that. I mean, there was one time I think we had in the middle of the season we had 3 kickers on the roster, and we were having competitions during the week while Mason was our kicker, right?
Wow.
But he always responded, and came back and won those situations. So, I probably haven't had as much patience along the way. But it's interesting over the time since Mason left, like our regular season percentage is I think slightly better. It's just been the playoff,
the big kicks,
when it really mattered the most, and unfortunately that matters, right? So that's we got to get that. But it would be nice, to have a guy that you felt for the next 10 to 15 years could be your guy, even though there's going to be some storms along the way.
And did you learn that? Do you think that was the thing that Ted really taught you was when to be patient and when not to be?
Yeah, I mean,
like of the many things.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of things. He was remarkable in that way. Not only with kickers, but with other players too, and kind of just sticking with a guy and letting him develop. When I think maybe the building or other guys in the building would have moved on quicker. He was really good at that, and he was an excellent evaluator. I think he really could kind of see how that might unfold. So I'd like to think I've learned some things from that way, but I don't know if I'll ever have the patience he had.
Well, and I think that's the hard. I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but I feel like being patient in the environment that we live in as a general manager of a club has got to be probably like the fortitude is really what you get paid for, right?
Yeah, and I think the way our league is set up with the salary cap and the way things are, young players you have to develop them, right? Like you can't.
Yeah, you're not getting them out of college.
Yeah, and I think because of the way it's a hard salary cap. So those players on first-year contracts are going to have to contribute some way, somehow, and you're going to have to live through some of that as they develop. So I think it's a necessity. There's just no way that you can kind of just replace those guys because it'll just eat your cap up.
And I think the patience thing is an interesting talking point because it was a hallmark for Ted, right? Yes. And that is who you followed. Because I can't imagine how difficult it is when you're watching, say, tape back from family night or one of these practices and you see one of your guards getting beat like badly, like quickly. I'm on the phone to Kevin Zeitler, like at that moment, But you guys, and that's you. I say you guys as far as like the program, right? Yeah. And it does seem to be kind of ingrained. Ted, you can go back to Ron in some cases, but like it is. Is that a product of being in Green Bay and being a very outlier type of market and not having an owner that you can have that patience?
Well, I would say the not having an owner thing probably definitely factors into that because I don't, I think we've been blessed since I've been here. Obviously, when I first got here, Bob Harlan was here, and then Mark, and now Ed. Nobody's kicking down my door because the guard got beat at family night and saying, "What are we doing?" I think that might happen at other places. Right. That hasn't happened here, and I think that them trusting and supporting the football part of it has been again, I haven't been many places, but from what I understand is probably a lot different than other places. So I think our structure and our organization allows for some of that patience. But again, I think you can go out and get those veteran names, but the other thing is like sometimes those veteran names aren't what they used to be. You know what I mean? So like, you may be getting a name, and maybe for a very short period of time you're going to get a little bit better play, but over the long term, it's not going to be a winning formula. So, and I also think we've always been kind of a draft and develop with with our core of our team, and I think sometimes when you do that, there's a little bit more investment from your players.
Right? They are part of what.
They help with buy-in.
Yeah, they're not journeymen. They're not mercenaries. Right. this is their team. You know, this is who drafted him, who believed into it. You know, and
I love the
think that
term
matters.
mercenary. I always say, you guys avoid Ronins, guys who like maybe come in for a year up for one big payday and then they're on to someplace else. Like you do try to develop people and develop a program. And to that point, this offseason was very notable as far as the turn you seemingly took from, by your own admission, you said the plan was to have Jordan and these young guys kind of all grow together, right? Yep. This offseason, it's very clear you made a decision, or maybe this was part of the plan all along. We are going to, maybe it's not trim the fat, but we're going to streamline. We're going to choose and identify our core players. You know, when you're trading away a Dontavian Wicks, when you're, allowing Quay Walker to leave, like these are guys who played a lot of football for you, and you could very easily have kept them in the fold, but you're identifying, to my eyes, like who are the core group that we're going to go win a championship with, especially when you're then kind of sprinkling in those veteran additions, to kind of help kind of bolster that core.
Yeah, I think,
makes sense.
It was a little bit unique going into as Russ and I kind of sat down and Matt, and we looked at, over the next few years, what was coming up. And we're fortunate enough to have a lot of young players that have really done a nice job for us. And we realized there was just no way we were going to be able to pay them all. There was just that we were going to have to make choices, which is not unusual, but we were just going to have to make more choices than maybe every year.
In a typical offseason.
Yeah,
right?
so as we kind of laid it out, we did have to kind of make some of those choices, and it's tough to like really good players, the Romeo Dobbses of the world, trading Dontavian Wicks and letting some of these guys out of the building, but we weren't. There were some things we wanted to do with our players, and we weren't going to be able to do it for all of them. So we thought it was kind of just better to go this route. And then at the same time, we have a bunch of young players that are kind of coming right into that peak of their careers where their experience level and their physical traits are, right kind of aligning up. And with some of the guys we lost, we just kind of thought it might be wise to bring in some guys that were already at that level as well.
Is there any extra pressure because after the trade for Micah, I mean, I know you don't believe in windows, as very famously said, and I repeat it often, that you don't believe in windows. But from the outside looking in, it's hard not to look at after the Micah acquisition, especially the way his contract sets up, along with Jordan's in a way. Yeah. Like this next kind of 2, maybe 3 years is a championship window. Not that you believe in it, but is there any pressure there to like kind of try to take advantage of that when it really kind of hamstrings you the fact that you don't have Micah for half of this season? Is there kind of, again, to that patience, how hard is it to beat back, I got to make a move because we have to take advantage of this window? Right.
I think that there's always that pressure to a certain degree. For what we did, like to give up a Kenny Clark and 2 4 or 5 year contracts and first round picks of probably really good players for us. For Micah, I think that says a lot what we felt about the player. And I think it says a lot about what we felt about our team. You know what I mean? Because that's a lot of assets to give up. And again, players like Micah at the age that he is don't come around very often.
At that position, too.
They just don't. And so I think if a player like that at the age that he was, becomes available, you have to consider that no matter, I think every team probably would. But I did feel good about our football team. And a lot of that goes back to the drafts that we had and the core of it, that we could acquire a player like Micah, give up the assets that we did and still be okay. And, we wouldn't have done it, I think, if I didn't feel that way.
As a side note here, I want to say you've trained your lieutenants well, by the way, because when all that Micah noise was going on, I was trying to get anything. It was like blood from a stone. Yes. I couldn't get a text back from guys who text me back right away all the time.
I think there were dire consequences of that.
Sounds like it. It feels like maybe that was the case.
One of my favorite parts of that is, is how long we were kind of able to keep that under wraps, because it was really kind of a breach on a Monday night.
Totally.
And it never really got out to that Thursday or whatever it was. So that was, I take a lot of pride in that. Ted always used to take a lot of pride in the Julius Peppers thing, because he felt he kept that under wraps as well.
Julius Peppers on Lambeau Field announcing to the world that he's been signed. Like that's legendary. That's amazing. That was an incredible moment.
So, but I was appreciative of the Cowboys and Micah's people, because again, that doesn't happen a lot in this day and age.
Speaking of young cores and signing guys, I'll break some news here. Did you just come from dealing with Tucker Kraft's contract and getting him locked up?
That's that guy right there.
When you were like, "Hey Russ, I want to sign Micah. Can we afford it?" Is that the conversation?
It was a little bit of, "Hey, I think I'm going to trade for Micah. It was one of those. But as you guys know, he's the best in the business, and
yes.
we're so fortunate to have Russ Ball in our organization, and obviously we've worked together for a long time, going back to when Ted was here and stuff. So, there's just a lot of faith that because again, when you do something like you do for Mike, or you pay Jordan what you pay Jordan, you're going to have to kind of figure some things out, and it's such an asset to have a guy like him who can kind of work his magic.
That's how you didn't answer the Tucker Kraft question.
No.
You asked about Mike.
Well, we kind of pivoted, so I
figured. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
No news breaking on Cheesehead TV. I understand what it is. We can't thank you enough for the time. Got a few more questions for you if I can hang out for a bit. I have to ask, just because it's kind of my wheelhouse, and it has been for a long time out there at Ray Nitschke, when it comes to, and you did address this once during the pandemic. Okay. When we started, we were allowed to film certain things, and then you guys put the kibosh on it, and you said, looking around the league, this is what everyone else is doing, and we don't want some competitive disadvantage, which in that environment made total sense. But now we got I was going to make a very unfortunate comparison. We have guys out there being very militant about what is or who.
Yeah,
can
the
be
fans
shot.
can't
Now the
videotape
fans
anymore.
have been shut down. And
well,
I
and
was
just to
told-
say, so I have a Clay Matthews video that I shot from outside the fence that has 500,000 views on YouTube. I think it's our number, besides our Brian Gutekunst interview, I think that's our second most watched video.
I'm sure.
But and it was funny because I'd be on public property doing it, and the security guards would always be coming up to us. That one year, it was hilarious.
Everything's a First Amendment issue. For
I was like an OG First Amendment auditor back then.
But then, so I've always known that this goes back to football, right? Because there are other organizations that allow a lot more filming, a lot more guys out there on social media, which I know you don't want.
Yeah.
What was that derived from Ted? Is that you? What is it about? Man, oh my God, we saw someone ran a wheel route. Yeah. The Super Bowl is canceled. It does feel like a little bit of overkill. You know what I'm saying?
First of all, and I know you guys know this, but all of us in the Nashville are paranoid out of our minds. Right?
1 billion% correct.
That's true. But then too, I think we are probably open to the public during training camp practices more than any other team, right? There's some teams that are open 3-4 practices.
Yep.
So they have a lot more opportunity to maybe work on things and close practices than we do, because, and again, I think it's important that those practices are open because it's such a part of this community and everything. So we are open a lot more. So I think the trade-off is that we're going to probably ask you not to film as much.
So it's you, not coach.
Huh?
So it's you, not coach.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. But believe me, I mean, again, I'm a coach's kid, and they're all paranoid.
They're all
paranoid.
Oh, I remember the great freak out when Randall Cobb got lined up in the backfield, and we were tweeting about it, and McCarthy just lost his mind. The great secret of Randall Cobb in the backfield is out.
Well, I remember when I first got the general manager job, and I used to make fun of Ted and coach because we'd be out at practice and they'd be say there's a guy up in the rest center, can somebody go check that out? and I always thought it was funny until I became the general manager. I'm like, Doug, hey, there's a guy up there. We probably need to check that out. And I remember a few years back we went to Cincinnati for a joint practice.
Oh yeah, right by the bridge.
Yeah, and they're downtown, and there's 7 skyscraper buildings around their practice fields, and I'm like, I shouldn't probably worry as much as I do.
We're doing okay with those guys renting out an Airbnb across the street, probably.
Right.
Looking at the season, you got obviously 3 preseason games to go. You got a joint practice, which is always valuable from an evaluation standpoint. Trying to circle it back to the patience. What point do you look at your team and think you've got a good handle on what you've got versus, man, I don't know about that. I should try to bolster this position group or something else?
I think every year's a little different. I think sometimes you can be in this time of year and feel really good, and then there's other times where maybe you're week 4 of the regular season and you're still kind of trying to get a grasp of, are we going to be good enough in this area, and do we need to do something before the trade deadline and things. So I do think usually what it comes down to is, you feel really good in a number of spots, and maybe there's 3 or 4 spots in the back end of your roster where guys are competing for a job, and can they, do we have somebody in that group that's competing for those spots? Can they do it? Like if called upon, can they go in there for 3 or 4 games and play at a winning level? The preseason games can help answer some of that, I think, because there's times you'll come out of a practice and you'll feel like, man, I think we're going to be really, really, we're going to be good there. and then they go into the preseason games and maybe it doesn't turn out that way. So as much as the practices matter, these preseason games and seeing them perform, without a coach right in their ear, when the clock's ticking, after a bad play, those kind of things, and having to do it play after play on the field on their own, it's important, and it can answer some of those questions. But I think it's sometimes it can bleed into the season. When
you look at some of the competition as far as positionally, right? How much do you talk with Matt about who you would like to see on the field? Because, obviously there's health concerns. You're a bit rolling the dice all the time when you take the field, right? But I would think something like a Brandon Cisse getting legit live reps, along with St. Just and even Keyshawn, right? Like, do you have those conversations where I not need, but I want to see those guys in the field?
Yeah, we talk about it every day, pretty much. I mean, we just talk about, all situations, whether it's, hey, we need to start getting this guy, maybe in the ones to see how he responds. Maybe he's doing really well in a certain portion of practice, but hey, let's see him against some other guys and see if he can still perform at this level. We'll talk about, heading into the preseason games, maybe who we want to see for more snaps, just because there's a longer evaluation period there. So, yeah, it's kind of a constant conversation, throughout the preseason, and then, even into the season sometimes too, as far as how things are going. So we kind of talk daily throughout the day, whether it be in the mornings or out of practice after. I mean, it's a constant conversation. And I will say, Matt does a great job of kind of, creating those opportunities that we need to see, and that it's not always easy. I mean, there's injuries, there's all kinds of things going on, and it can be tough sometimes, but he does do a really good job. It makes our job easier as we get down to it. We gotta pick the team, because the hardest thing is, when you get down to it and you got to pick a team and maybe really haven't been able to see what you need to see. And sometimes that happens because guys have been injured and whatnot, but it's all part of it. But I like how we go about it.
What's that like? Like you as a leader and then dealing with coach, because clearly, I'm sure you're not his boss, right? But you guys are equals inside of the triangle, as we know it, outside looking in.
We call it the triangle.
We call it the triangle.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a long.
This is like a whole bit because I'm like, it's the triangle.
Whenever
when
there
Mark
was,
Murphy put
somebody got drafted or signed, right, and wasn't playing as much as they should, or something like. There's obviously a break in the triangle.
Break in the triangle.
There's
like
Matt
where
over
you
here,
don't agree with
Brian
Matt, or Matt doesn't agree, or Mark.
Is strong. There's no break.
It is, yeah.
But that's what you would hope. But every once in a while, there's a break.
So I guess give us a. I mean, I'm a nerd, so give me a little bit of insight into that. That's from a leader. For me, as a CEO, I try to support my staff. I try to basically, and I know you do too, obviously. But where you're trying to be a support role, but at the same time, you make the executive decision, right? But the coach is so instrumental in who he wants, right? Yeah. And so I'm sure you guys piss each other off sometimes. What's that like? What's that dynamic?
Really between the three of us, because Russ factors in a lot too with the financial considerations of what we're doing. So I think that the nice thing, obviously, we've worked together for quite a while now, and certainly there's always been, you're working through things, especially early. But we've worked together, so I think there's a really healthy respect of each other's job. Right. You know what I mean? And I think the one thing, for me, being able to grow up around some really good leaders, Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, Mike Holmgren, Mike McCarthy, and seeing some of these guys in these leadership roles, is kind of understanding what you're an expert at and kind of, having faith and trust in the people that are experts in their areas. I'm not going to walk into Jason's office and start telling him how to do PR, although he probably thinks I do. But I don't. That's not my area. It's not my expertise, And so I think I'd like to think there's a lot of faith and trust in each other. And again, there's good communication. I think there's times I may not understand what Matt might be doing, but he's going to kind of explain it to me. And again, I think having the support of the organization and Ed Policy, Mark Murphy when he was there, I think that can't be understated either.
It makes a world of sense. So what you're saying is you didn't trade away Dontavian Wicks and allow Romeo Doubs to walk so Matthew Golden could see the field more because you were upset because Matthew Golden didn't get a lot of opportunity last year.
No, I think, again, like we were talking earlier, I think, again, we had a lot of decisions to make. And the one thing I think sometimes maybe everybody doesn't understand, if you make a decision to extend and sign a player, that's going to cost somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's a hard salary cap. It's not, The flexibility of it, there's some, but particularly in our situation right now, whenever we make these decisions to sign a Christian Watson, a Jaden Reed,
Tucker Kraft,
Wyatt, possibly a Tucker Kraft.
Nice try.
But it does affect other things, and so the nice part about it is we really had more players that we really liked than we could really afford to sign.
Well, Brian, we can't thank you enough for the time. I'm sitting here thinking, you'll never remember this, but the first time we ever met was at the Abbey Pub.
That wasn't me.
Oh yeah, it was. It was the summer of the Dream Team in Philadelphia, because I'll never forget Alonzo Highsmith just cursing out the television, because it was on ESPN all the time, and he was very upset about all the kind of glazing of the Eagles. But you came in, I think you had a beer, you didn't say a word, and then you left. But that was the first time we met, and now here we are.
Yeah.
It's an incredible journey.
Yeah.
You've done an amazing job. We can't thank you enough for the time here and for the work you do for the Packers.
Well, I appreciate it. I've been fooling them for 27, 28 years. I got to keep fooling for a little longer.
Baby.
So, yeah, no, I'm excited about the season. I really appreciate you guys having me on. This is an unbelievable place. I'll definitely be back. There's too much I want to see. So it's cool. Very cool.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.